Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. We have a question from YouTube user Tony Rollins, who says, do you have any advice for school teachers with tenure? Yes. If you are facing any threat to your tenure, if you are facing a tenure hearing, which would probably be called in New York like a 3020A hearing, you need to keep an eye on your union. Not all unions are created equal, and not all union representation in terms of who they have represent you at the tenure hearing is created equal. So first things first, if you're facing any kind of specifications, any kind of tenure charges, any kind of challenge to your tenure, you need to talk to other teachers far and wide, not just like in-depth conversations, like who has had this happen before, what happened, what went on, what were your frustrations, what were your concerns, how did the union do, and get a feel for that. And I'll tell you why. Loosely speaking, don't quote me on these numbers, but I think that if you are a tenured teacher facing a tenure hearing in New York City, and you go with your union representation, your union provides you representation, as far as I can tell from the caseload I witness, the termination rate is about 80%. Now listen, that's a very small sample size. Like we're talking less than 50 cases over like 5 years. But I think when the union represents you, you're looking at about 80% termination rate. Conversely, when you're having private representation, in the past 5 years, I am aware of 0 tenured teachers who went to a tenure hearing, a 3020A hearing, with private representation that ended up being terminated, having their tenure stripped. Now listen, that is a small sample size. Every case is different. Obviously, that's not... Nobody's saying there's a guarantee if you hire private counsel that you're not going to... Listen, certainly. And in that sample, I'm saying 0 people were terminated, but like there are people that I'm aware of who had to retire, who cut deals because they did. Listen, sometimes teachers do bad things. Sometimes teachers make very bad decisions, and those teachers should no longer be teachers, and that's okay. But there's a controlled landing, right? You still have to live. You have to make an exit. You have to sometimes you have to realize maybe I shouldn't be a teacher anymore. But in that process, you can also take account of the fact that like, okay, well, I'm giving up a career, so there's got to be some transition, and I've got tenure, and a tenure hearing can cost the school district $100,000, $200,000, sometimes $300,000 if it's being fought correctly by private counsel. So that's leverage, right? And there's teachers who I've seen attorneys say, listen, you can't hire us unless you agree to retire, right? Like I've seen that. Some teachers don't like that. Other teachers say, yeah, you're right. Okay, well let's make it a paid exit, right? Like that's something the attorney can do for you potentially. So, Tony, what I would say to you is consider watching your union counsel very, very carefully. Get an idea of how big a caseload they have. Get an idea of what the discovery procedures are in your tenure process, wherever you are, and get a real feel for how aggressively your attorney is going to pursue discovery. How aggressively is your attorney going to look at the investigations that were handled in your tenure hearing, right? Like, how much time is your attorney going to spend talking to witnesses? How much time is your attorney going to spend discussing settlement options with you? How much time is going to be spent? Because if you treat this like a real litigation, the odds that you will be successful and you're happy with the result go up exponentially. So listen, if the union counsel is like, oh yeah, I'll call your witnesses 2 days before hearing. What? 2 days before hearing? No. What about depositions? Or do we have deposition rights? Do we have document discovery? Do we have interrogatories? Why would you prep my witnesses 2 days out? What if they don't say what we need them to say? What are you talking about? I need better. Now you can push them, and often the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and you'll get better representation from your union. If for whatever reason you're not getting the representation you need, consider hiring private counsel. It's expensive. Your union counsel is free, almost always, right? That's important. Free means a lot. Private counsel might charge you 10, 20, 30 grand for a tenure hearing. Now, is it worth it? They're certainly going to put in the hours, right? If you have good counsel and they're treating a tenure hearing like a real true litigation, like a federal trial, well, yeah, 30,000 is probably pretty cheap in the scheme of things, especially if it saves your career, right? I mean, you make, depending where you work, somewhere between 40 and probably 140 a year, right? There's certainly teachers. The max in New York City is supposed to be 106, but I've definitely seen teachers make 140 with all the extras and everything. You know, if you're defending $140,000 a year and a pension, right? You can invest that pension if you make it. For a lot of educators, that's very important. Well, does it make sense to hire private counsel? It very well might. If you see your union-provided counsel doing a shoddy job, it might very well make sense for you to hire private counsel. What else can I tell you? Go on the offensive if you can. Often, you'll see this happens a lot. I don't know if you are familiar with what an IEP is, but often I'll see teachers who have tenure get loaded up with students with violent IEP, like IEPs that speak to violence, violent tendencies, or rowdiness, or they'll have their class loaded with students who are difficult, and they'll have resources stripped out, their prep periods taken away. Maybe their assistants don't have as much time there. Maybe they're being forced to be alone in the classroom with difficult students, right? There's a lot of things that happen. And you would say, oh, there's no way that principals would put a teacher in harm's way where they might get physically assaulted by a student, or they might have a caseload of students that are very difficult and are going to create problems for the teacher, or parents. Like, you might have a class full of parents who file complaints, right? All of that is common operating tactics for principals and vice principals and superintendents, right? They will do that to teachers to get them loaded up with a lot of bad stuff in their file so that that tenure hearing looks real scary and might be able to push that teacher out if they want to. Why would they do that? Well, let's face it, younger teachers are a fraction of what older teachers are. And part of being a superintendent or principal is playing with that budget, right? Got to move the slider. And they do that. Now, also, listen, don't get me wrong. There's some really bad teachers that got to be fired. Like, that's a major issue in New York City right now. There is some really bad teachers who do really bad things. And it is difficult to fire them. In part, because they probably hire private counsel when they go to tenure hearings. But that's not my job. I didn't sign up to make the education system better. That's ostensibly the superintendent's or the school board or some politician's job. I don't know. Maybe the Department of Ed. I don't know. That's their job. My job is protecting my clients. And you, Tony Rollins, I think are asking as a potential client. So, these are my answers. I hope they help. If it did help, like, subscribe, comment down below. Helps the channel to grow. Take care.